All right, so now that I'm recording, I'll start with the importance of SAT and GPA. That they are the big two, especially at colleges that are so large that they don't have admission staffs that can go over and really scrutinize every element of a kid's application. And most state universities are in that category. Their staffs are a little larger than a small liberal arts school. The small school might have 4,000 students, 1,000 per class. And for them, they might have 20 admissions people. The huge university with 6 times that, they got 24,000 people, they may only have 5 or 6 extra admissions to people. So they're not proportionally opening up their time and their resources to read over your application. So for those schools, the numbers are a much bigger deal. For the liberal arts schools, this extra element that you're working on, the essay presentation, is significant. It's significant because at a minimum, it could be a tiebreaker that they have 25 kids on, we call it the bubble, for only 4 or 5 more places. We can only admit 5 more people to our class. But these 25 have about the same GPA, about the same SAT scores. Now what do we do? So that could be the tiebreaker. It could also be, a good essay can be the justifier for somebody who's deficient on one of these, but they like you for all these other reasons. So your GPA wasn't that good, but you rocked the SAT. They like other stuff. They know that you're going into an area of need. Ooh, it's a woman physicist. They don't have that many girls going into physics. So the essay can then be a compelling justifier for them. And no matter what, the essay is your chance to show them elements that they don't already know. And that, to me, is my biggest hint. So it's coming first. Ready? Use the essay to show the colleges something interesting about you that they don't already know. Again, that they don't already know. Now, that really cuts down on things. For a lot of you are thinking, what do I write about? I do all these things, and I have all these ideas. Well, the things you do are probably already known. You're doing it through the application aspect. You might be submitting a resume, which I happen to like, and I'll get into that later. You might be getting some recommendations that you know what they're about, so the colleges already know that about you too. Write about what they don't know that makes you appealing. So your interests, if not stated elsewhere, could be done. You can't do all of them though. And here's the second big point. Don't try to do a lot of things in a 2-page Common App. Don't try. You will end up diluting yourself. There are places for everything outside the Common App if you really want to. The Common App has expanded its versatility so that extra information can be still uploaded. And just in case you had a space limitation or something doesn't fit on the Common App, you can still email the college, or you can do an old-fashioned letter. They really do read everything they get, with a few exceptions. When a kid is just larding it on with, I want to be an artist, and I'm showing you 7 portfolio pieces. Well, 7's good. 7D is too much, and they're not going to want to see those extra 63 pieces that you did in sculpture class and painting class. 7. When you've shown that you're a good writer and you've been published in your school newspaper 4 times. Great. 40 times? No. They're going to say that's excess, we can figure it out. But short of that, like 10 times multiple that I'm giving you, other stuff is welcome. Smaller colleges especially want to know about you. They really do. And they have a hard time because very few colleges do an evaluative interview. Colleges that give interviews, most of them are informing you to sell you. They want more applicants. They happen to want to ding more applicants too, meaning say no to a higher and higher percentage every year. So if they get more and they can ding more, their ranking actually goes higher. But for good or for not so good, they're generally trying to appeal to you or your parents about why you should apply here. Very few colleges are doing evaluative interviews. But I'd like your thinking when you're doing the Common App to be providing something that if I could be evaluated face-to-face, this is stuff I'd like to bring up. And once again, in an interview, I know they've already seen my resume and they've seen my GPA and my transcripts and they're about to see what some recommenders are recommending about me. So what else can I do? Whether it's an interview or this common application, I can add to it. So big thing is don't try to do too much in 2 pages. You've had 4 years of high school, or at least 3. 3 years of high school. There's not any way to recap 3 years. Pick 1 or 2 incidents, 1 or 2 themes, and elaborate on those 1 or 2. You will have a much more compelling essay. And don't fret that you end up putting stuff out that you kind of like. Let me give you my method for finding 1 or 2 that other people will like. Write about 3 or 4 things. If you have somebody who's a guide, and a few of you have signed up with Ivy Bound to have a guide, but others of you have guidance counselors that can help. Either they're private counselors or they're working for the school, or they may be your parents, okay? But that second set of eyes can be evaluating 3 or 4 themes and getting you down to 1 or 2. There's even the possibility of using all 3 or 4 in essays, and that's because there is a place for extra stuff. Some colleges are specifically asking for new things. Why do you add diversity to this college? What book was influential to you? Oh, I want to write about that anyway. Good. Put the book one in the book place and put the other thing that you really want to let the college know into the Common App, and you're killing 2 birds. You're covering everything, but without being in one essay covering lots of stuff. So, one reason why an incident is very good is because it lets you reflect on that incident. That's where something insightful can be brought forward, something that shows maturity, something that shows growth, something that shows fit with a school. All 4 of those things are good. Maturity, fit, growth. They are excellent. And, oh, insightful was the 4th one. These things don't come out of a resume. Now, these things should be specific. Generalities are not going to help you enough. And I'm going to give you one generality that flat out hurts. This goes into the category of what not to do. Don't say, I'm super, I'm superb, I'm a consummate student. Instead of saying it, show it. Instead of saying great things, show good things that allow them to conclude you're great. And you can't say great things about yourself, even if you are great, because you lose the element of humility. So where Can somebody know you're great? A lot of good in your essay and a recommender. See, the recommender can use the superlatives, one of the best student athletes I've had, a consummate student now who's destined to be a scholar when she gets to college. Those are really good things coming from someone else. And that's something some of you can get if you can kind of push the recommender into it. Okay? Some recommenders want to be totally private. They don't want to have any outside influence from you. Most recommenders welcome it. And this may be a secret that I'm giving away, but I believe in giving the recommender good stuff to work with so that A, it's at least easier for him, B, really helps him know you in areas that he doesn't already, and C, just maybe, he puts it right back into his ultimate product, the recommendation. I like when my students feed recommenders. Here is what I'm hoping you can attest to. I'll say that again because it's a good line in an email. Dear Professor, well, you're high school, so not a professor yet. Dear Mr. So-and-so, my English teacher, I am honored that you're willing to write on my behalf. Here are some of my goals, and here are a few things I'm hoping you can attest to. And you're writing it out. There's an email that he can copy-paste. He probably isn't going to do it verbatim because that's your words. If he does, it becomes his words, and it's still ethical because he's the one who's signing it. He's got the opportunity to say, no, I'm not using any of these words. I'm writing separately. But this is the chance to have what I call the golden opportunity, that you get to say about yourself really good things. The truly golden opportunity almost never happens at the high school level. When you get to college and are looking for graduate school recommendations, there are a lot of professors that will actually say, so this is more like the platinum opportunity, better than gold. And they'll say, write it yourself, I'll look it over, edit, and send it. That happens in the workplace quite frequently too. And I still don't think of those people as being unethical. They're making it easier on themselves to evaluate you, and then it's their words ultimately signed off on by them. So if you fed them interesting and good stuff, you might see it come back in the form of the recommendation. I'd like you to take that opportunity where you can. Okay, I want to talk about some of the little what not to do's. Actually, some of them become kind of big what not to do's. Number one, putting a single school into the Common App and not changing it after early decision. When you're only doing one school at the early decision stage, you could get away with saying, I really would like to be at NYU for this reason. But you get to change the Common App twice, and you better change it when you're applying to a bunch of other schools. And sometimes you're not saying NYU specifically, but you're saying, I'd really like to be in a big city. I plan to exploit my theater propensities there. All right? And that'll work. Maybe at the early decision, early action for 3 or 4 places in the heart of New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. But when you decide to apply to Bucknell, which is far away from Philadelphia, you can't be saying that anymore. So be really careful. Generally, the specifics about a college, why I want to be there, can be done in a place that on the Common App is asked for, or in the school's separate section is deliberately asked for. So rarely do I even want somebody to say the specifics about the college in the Common App's regular essay. put it somewhere else. Just make sure if you do it that it changes when you move on to other schools. Number 2, if you're sending an essay that mom or dad would be embarrassed to read, not a good essay. All right? If your own parents are kind of going to cringe, you're being too radical to be accepted. I'll give you the rare exception, though, where radical might be a good thing. I'll give you 2 exceptions. One is when you're applying to a fairly radical school. Hampshire College is kind of near me. It's near Amherst, and it's for kids who are like deliberately out there, don't ever want to be part of the mainstream. I still think a mainstream application, even at Hampshire, is probably just as good. And then you can be weird if you get in and want to go there. But for most colleges, being way out is not good. If you are applying, this wouldn't work ED, but you're applying to a lot of reach schools. A reach school is one that you got less than a 5% chance of getting in. Okay. Since your odds are so low, assuming you're applying to some core schools where you're going to likely get into 1 or 2 of them, then the reach could be a radical thing that your parents might even be a little embarrassed about. Because what's the worst they can say? No, that's the worst they can say. And if you're applying to 15 top 20 schools, and you're unlikely, less than 5% likely to get into any one of them, but the radical is done on all 15, maybe one of them does come through. But you don't want to do this with core schools or your early decision school where you really have only one shot. Here's one that an admissions officer shared with me, Duke, saying, we hate seeing when an applicant talks about a major that we don't offer. I think in Duke's case it was some type of engineering, I forget what, some sort of chemical engineering maybe. They mentioned that there's an area of finance they don't do, and it was pretty evident that the student just didn't look up what Duke has. Stay away from that. Another one is picking a topic that you think you can solve the world's problems. I mean, a major thing that you at age 17 have figured it out. Too much hubris. Too unrealistic. Okay? If you have figured it out that early, patent it now. Okay? Go to the patent office, work on it now, and then apply a year from now. You'll take the time off to make it work. You'll make millions of dollars in the process, and you can get into Columbia. But until that time, I think you really should say, here is a world's problem that I have a suggestion for, but don't assume that you have the insight that millions of older, presumably wiser, at least more experienced people who've been working on it have failed to do. The last one is there's an essay topic that offers you to take a stand on an issue, controversial issue of the day. I think there are better things to talk about. I think that's the worst of the topics to pick. I think you too easily can alienate half of your readers, and maybe even the half that might be on your side, you still risk not being persuasive enough. So here's my solution there. Write an editorial. If it gets published by a local newspaper, put that in as a published accomplishment that shows that you've been thoughtful enough and received well enough by the New London Day. It doesn't have to be the New York Times. You're not going to get published in the New York Times. highly unlikely. But mid-sized newspapers, you can. I'm in the Hartford area. They specifically like when people under 20 opine. They give them a lot of space. Even if it's just a short letter to the editor that's 1.5 paragraphs, you know, if that gets published, then here's a little snippet you can add to your application. Once again, you're showing your thoughtfulness. You're showing that you're actually contributing to the discourse of the world, not just to the discourse of 5 people on the Stanford admissions committee. You've actually put this into play. That adds to your accomplishment. That's what I would do with that topic. Let's take a look at those topics. And with this, I'm asking you to look at options 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For most of you, it's page 2. It does look like this. Okay, so they're kind of bold. And these are the common app essay options now. And I'm including below this some of the older ones because the comparison, I think, might help illuminate why I'm steering to certain ones and why I don't like other ones. Look them over. Take a read because some of you haven't read them. Read over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll regroup in 1 minute.
I'm sorry, where can I find them?
The email that we sent, just in case I'll scroll. Sorry, I could have done that before. Look at my screen and you'll see page 2 now. But otherwise, you should have it in the email. It's the second printed page in the email. There it is, options 1 through 5.
We lost it on the screen.
Thank you. It should be back now. I hyperclicked. All right, any opinions of these 5 which I don't like? Are there any, from what the little that you've heard from me so far, are there any that you think I'm not going to encourage you to do? They're all decent, okay? You'll see some in the next set that I really hated. But I'm going to give you one problem with option 2, okay? You can show humility in lots of ways without doing option 2. And I think option 2 easily brings up, why did this person fail in the first place? Okay? What did I do after getting in trouble for punching somebody? And I became a model citizen of the school. But why did you punch him in the first place? What did I do following a sports incident where I was accused of cheating? Well, why were you accused of cheating in the first place? When I tried to get a group together and we were going to protest for the administration to do something different at my school, and the group fell apart. You can learn from this, but it still starts with this, I think, ugly questioning that the reader might have. Well, other kids don't have that failure in the first place. So this is the only one I'm not, I think you could do a good job with it, but I think there are better things. And I tend to like number 1. First off, almost anything can fit into number 1 tangentially. And even directly, number 1, I think, does that thing that I started with. That something that you don't know, and they even say their application would be incomplete without it. The other part of number one that I think is very appealing is share your story. And stories seem to have an appeal. They seem to show maturity. Stories, if well done, usually sound like they're coming from a 30-year-old, not a 17-year-old. Colleges like that. They like admitting students that they think are pretty mature. So this gives a broad area. Now let me narrow it a little bit within number one. I don't like incidents from before age 13. Okay? Age 13, you can consider yourself adult. You can reflect on things more meaningfully. It's rare that an 8-year-old is really, really thoughtful. And if you were really, really thoughtful back then, I'd rather you show something from the last 9 years so that when you're 16, you show something even more modern. So keep it to your teenage years. Another thing that people can go wrong with in any of these options, but I worry about option one, so do it right. Where it says background, you can mention where your grandparents came from, what your parents or siblings do, good or not so good. But don't make it about one of them. I've seen students who praise their grandma, and they want to act in their ways of the grandma. And guess what? Grandma's not applying to University of Chicago. They're not asking for grandma. They need to admit you. And if you want to touch on grandma, fine. That can add to a story element. You can bring in a quotation that grandma told you 3 years ago, and since then you've adhered pretty well. But you're adhering. Your adhering is the you part. The what you've done at age 14, 15, and 16 that might have been inspired by grandma. And if you want to say grandma first told me this when I was 7, fine, but how do you put it into play? It's at age 16 or 17, not at age 7. Option 1 could end up becoming an element of a diversity essay that's not in the Common App. So if you are pining to do option 3, 4, or 5, and you like option 1, I think you can do a good job with 3, 4, or 5, push option 1 into the supplemental essay, and then the readers have an even more complete you. As far as telling the story, if you can do it with humor, that's awesome. But humor is hard. And this needs to be bounced off of more than just one person. Okay? This is where you need, I'm going to say 4. All right? And I want 3 of them to laugh before you say, I'm taking this. Because 3's a crowd. Okay, if you go 3 for 3, you don't need the 4th. I need 4 people to be asked and 3 of them to chuckle or see the humor. Otherwise, don't use it. Okay, it's hard to be humorous. Most performers even are only humorous about 50% of the time. So you're not a performer. And thus, I worry that humor falls flat and it becomes dangerous. Here's another one. Kind of dangerous, but could be very good if done well. Invoking means bringing down a famous quotation. Great. Famous quotations show that you're well-read and maybe thoughtful, but I want you to apply it to yourself. I've seen applications that leave a quotation just hanging there, or they do one better. All right, Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. But you didn't apply it to where the buck stopped in your student organization or on your sports team that you had a chance to lead. Okay, get deeper into you after you've started the quotation. All right, I'm supposed to give over a magic word that saves you all $50. I'm going to do that now. I like the word trenchant. Trenchant. Who knows what it means? Keen, insightful, astute. Good word. Good word for a recommender to maybe use about her. Good thought to try to put into your essay. But once again, don't say, I'm trenchant. Let somebody else say it about you or show it. So when you're writing to Michelle to show that you've attended, just use that word and nobody gets charged. All right, I'm going to open it up to questions in about 2 minutes. And then I want to turn to the back half with a few specifics that I think could add to your application. So 2 minutes. I still want to talk about a danger in number 4. I think the problem might take a full half of your essay. You've only got 600 words, and describing the problem itself could easily be 300 of them, leaving you too little space for the thinking it through, showing that you're really good at something. So if you're choosing number 4, try to describe the problem succinctly. It's not easy. If you're describing what happened while you were camping and the problems you faced when electricity went out on a 10th grade camping trip, you got a while before you can get to the you and the solution part. So remember, this still needs to be about you. And it can show a fit with you in the future. So this is where I'm going to add a final big point. The rest of them are going to be small after the questions. But the big point is showing them what college can expect of you for the next 4 years, I think is very helpful. What can college expect of you for the next 4 years? So you're this kind of person, and it will carry on. And that's not even a bad sentence when you get to the specific college, again, not the Common App part, which is going to all of them, but when you get the chance to say to Columbia one thing, and Amherst you might say something different, and Lehigh you'll say something different, but you can then say, I hope to apply this assiduousness in rehabilitating friends or rehabilitating people who've fallen on hard times when I go to Lehigh. I see there's already a student internship in something or other, something that builds, fosters good relationships in the town of, you can give Lehigh's town. It might be different, it will be different when you're applying to Columbia. So the fit with an individual school adds something. And the reason why that fit is helpful is some schools really want to take only the people who are going to say yes back. That if we admit you, we expect 70% of you will say, good, I'm coming. That's one reason why schools like ED, early decision, forces the person admitted to go, and it helps their rankings. But because most people still don't apply early decision, colleges like when they think the kid that they're going to admit will say yes to them. And so in the specific part of the common, well, not so common, the specific essays, a reason why the college can expect you will go there over the 5 other good institutions that seem similar to them would be nice. You're applying to 6 big Midwestern universities. Why Wisconsin? And when you get to doing University of Illinois, what does Champaign, Illinois have that others don't? You do want to add that tailoring to make you look more appealing. All right, I've said a lot, and I'm open to questions for the next 10, maybe even 15 minutes. What I'll do is I'll go from west to east. Anyone west of the Mississippi listening with questions, you get to go first. Fire away. I got a lot of Northeast people. All right, so I'll move. Central time zone people. Anyone there with questions about what we've done so far? Fire away. All right, Southerners, below the Mason-Dixon line. I know I got at least 2 of you. Louisiana, you got a question? Georgia? Even Maryland, I know one of you is from Maryland. That's south of the Mason-Dixon line, barely. All right, Northeast, any questions? All right, then I'm going to move on. I'm not going to end up calling. Well, actually, somebody chatted me, so hold on. Correcting me, I might have said undergrad GPA a long time ago. I am referring to high school GPA.
I got a question from the West.
Okay, hi, fire away.
So, on the topic where...
Can you get a little closer to your microphone?
Sure, I'll speak more loudly. On option number 2,
Yeah.
what if the failure included getting in trouble for like fairly common things that teenagers get in trouble,
Yep.
but it did mark a turnaround?
I'm going to address it 2 ways. You're getting into trouble at some point. You're going to need to make a statement. And that statement should look like this. Here, I'll probably coincide with your thoughts. Underage drinking, you got busted. Or smoking dope, you got busted. Or plagiarism, which seems to me the most innocuous, but colleges take it really, really seriously for things that kids are often innocent about. Well, what is plagiarism? But it's on your record, okay? You have to acknowledge it in 1 paragraph, and in paragraph 2, say why this won't happen again. Right? That's the formula. Acknowledge it. Here's the facts. Why this won't happen again. Now, whether to do that as part of the Common App itself, it's dicey. And my feeling is, if it really is the momentous thing in your life that's truly made you a better person, sure, put it in. That does fall into the number 2, so it answers number 2 well. But if it's peripheral, or in fact, if it's even tied for number 1 and not the number 1, I lean towards making the other thing number 1 and making this turnaround thing from a bad incident a separate entity. Does that make sense, Paul? Others?
I have a question.
Yep.
If your top pick school is a bit of a reach school, should you still apply early decision?
Tough school. Tough question. Did you say if your top school is a reach school?
Yeah, like the school you really want to go to is a bit of a reach for you.
Let me define reach this way.
Okay.
A reach to me is a school where you have less than 20% chance of getting in. Now, that's every Ivy League school, unless you have a great jump shot or you're starting quarterback, okay? That's every one of really the top 15. Even if you have a 4.0 and a 2250 SAT score, you're still less than 20% chance of getting in. So if that SAT is now at 2350 and a 4.0, then maybe you have better than 20% at any one of those top schools. So here's your reach. You're at less than 20% chance of getting in. As long as you have a very appealing school that's among the core. The core is my 6 schools that I have between 20 and 50% chance of getting in. Doesn't even mean I've got a majority chance, but when you apply to 6 core schools, that's not early decision, That's during the regular decision. If you applied to 6 schools where you had 20% to 50% chance of getting in, I think you're going to get into one of them. So you're probably going to be a happy person. But if you end up saying, I'm still not going to be happy because I didn't apply to Tufts and I really want to go to Tufts, and I only had a 5% chance of getting in there, I think you should do it. Because you are destined for disappointment otherwise, and you're going to get into a core school that's good, so I don't think you're losing. That is truly a tough question. If I can frame it another way, tell me how I should.
No, I think that pretty much answers that.
Early decision does give you a lift. And let me make sure everyone realizes it's more of a lift than early action. Big difference. Early decision is where the colleges allow you to apply to only one school, and if that school says yes, you are obligated to go. You have to withdraw your applications for other colleges. You cannot accept another college, with maybe the exception of if the financial aid situation is really so remarkably undoable. But a college accepting you for ED is not going to try to knife your family to pay every last penny in the piggy bank. So it's pretty rare that you can get out of an early decision. Early decision gives you an admissions lift. The colleges like admitting early because A, it smooths their workload, B, they get enthusiastic people, C, they get enthusiastic people who go back enthusiastic to high school wearing their gear. I'm going to Notre Dame, and I've got the sweatshirt, and I've got the cap. And Notre Dame gets a lot of marketing from that in December because they got a bunch of kids in different towns who've been admitted early decision. So colleges like that enough that they're willing to give a significant advantage. And it's been studied in the past with the result of at least the study that I read saying over 100 SAT point advantage just by applying early. Meaning if you wanted Duke in the regular decision, you needed a 2200 compared to a 2100 as an early decision round. So you are giving up a chit that you can only use for one school if you do early decision. Early action has not the kind of admissions advantage. It's still a nice thing because you get to hear early. You get to know, all right, I'm going to this school no matter what. You don't have to apply to backup schools if you hear early from a good EA school. So I do like both at the same time. If you can apply ED and EA, because EA isn't binding, that's good. How to strategize when you're really not sure, it's a tough call, and that's where guidance counselor, which I'm not. I'm good at SAT prep. I'm sharing these things about the Common App because I'm a good essay writer too. But the strategizing and planning, I do kind of punt to other people for help there. Any other questions?
Mark, I have a question over here from the Northeast.
Okay.
We're just trying to figure out in option number 1, if you have something overcome, a diagnosis of a chronic disease that, kind of early onset as a kid, but now have gone and grown up through this and has kind of changed the way you've approached things.
Okay.
Is that, it's something that's not going away. Is that an appropriate fit for number 1? She doesn't want it to be a pity party. It's not about that. It's just we're trying to figure out if that's a route to go, or should we steer away?
I think it's very good. And because you said it, don't pity me. This
Right.
is what launched me to the me that I am today.
Yes.
So you're not going to spend a lot of time. You're not even going to story tell more than maybe 3 sentences about the injury, the hospital, the recovery. You are now 4 years down the road because of the injury or the hospital or the recovery or that great doctor or that great therapist who helped you in the recovery. Now you yourself are X. And you then have all but the 50 words you spent on those 3 sentences. You got the rest of the essay to really talk about you.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I like the way you said pity party. I sometimes say don't use a handicap, even if it is one, as a crutch. Don't expect them to say, oh, poor you, we should admit you because you're disadvantaged. No, they want to admit people who are advantaged. And so showing diversity of experience is good, but don't go in making them feel like they have to accommodate you. Now, some kids truly, they're wheelchair bound and they need that kind of accommodation. That's still only physical and not mental. Don't accommodate my inability to think for myself. Be the powerful thinker that it sounds like you're describing for your student.
Thank you.
Sure. Others? All right, I've moved to the prior topics, and I just want to show, in a way, why they got rid of so many of them. When I was counseling this up until 2013, when they changed, we would say, do number 1. And because kids would run into problems with 2, 3, 4, 4 was awful for kids, because they would say why Beethoven is wonderful. You're not Beethoven, though. You just listened to him, and you ended up with a useless essay. So the colleges, they really took pity on kids who would be wrongly writing in favor of Beethoven and not themselves by getting rid of these middle 4, really all 5 are pretty much gone. And now you've got 1 and sort of 2 that are left. So if you think your topic falls more into number 3, 4, or 5, then don't. Go back to the true topics, the ones that are really in play now, and use this as a warning. These were eliminated for a reason. The colleges didn't like it. I talked about the youngster, which you don't want to talk about. Okay, I do want to talk about diversity. It's a statement that you shouldn't have to put into your Common App. It's a statement that might be desired or even demanded at some schools. University of California in particular, they really love diverse elements of kids. Can a white guy be diverse? Yes. So don't be afraid of that. Think about how you mingled with diverse people or how you had experience in a situation that normally white suburban males like you don't show up at. I had a kid write an essay about, and he's from West Hartford, Connecticut, very suburban, not that diverse, but there's a Vietnamese market in the corner of it. And he talked about his journey into a dong market. And where they, they'll slaughter fish in front of you, and they will take out eels for you to put in the bag, and how he now actually cooks Vietnamese for his family once a month. That's kind of neat. A diverse experience that might be just doing something one town away. You don't have to go to Guatemala for a diverse experience. So anyone can have a diversity experience. You don't leave that one blank. I think if the college suggests it, that's one you want to put in to your extra essays. Okay, I'm near the end. I want to talk about, oh, I just lost my place. Use the power scroll. I'm just going to let these stare at you. I'm not going to come at all of them, but these are themes that I've seen be good. So a couple of them I actually quoted verbatim. The one, I'm an addict, which was a first line. Kind of shocking. I want to read more. This guy can't be that bad. I'm an addict for something wholesome was good. And these end up with that bottom line, 5 words. Appear wise for your age. I think that is a good way to conclude, or if you're not concluding it, hopefully the reader can conclude it for you. Appearing wise for your age. You're not juvenile. You're appearing wise. All right, I'm not going to get into the how to select except to show a matrix. So this is no longer the essay. Do I have any more to cover on the essay? Yes, I do. I have a few words that if a recommender can use them, I'd like to see in there. Remember how you might have the chance to give the recommender a paragraph about you? And here are a few words that might come into that paragraph. Assiduous, trenchant, keen, perspicacious, Perspicacious, diligent, tenacious, resilient, possessing elan, E-L-A-N, sort of a verb. And radiant, if you're an especially friendly person. Like those. Now, let me just show you a little on school selection because some people are afraid to apply to 30 schools. I don't want you to be afraid to, okay? And don't let a guidance counselor cut you down unnecessarily. It's your future. If you've done research and you really could happily spend 4 years at a school, don't knock it out until maybe another school acceptance knocks it out. So here's what I mean. When you're in at a reach school early, you got early acceptance to, wow, I didn't think I'd get in to University of Virginia. And they said yes early. Now, all the schools that are, I'm not going to do. James Madison was in that category. Gettysburg College was in that, not going to do now that I got into Virginia. Just withdraw, okay? Collecting acceptances is, in my mind, not that ethical. It does hurt other students around you, and it hurts future students at your school, your younger brother perhaps, because if you're applying to 13 schools and dinging 10 of the 11 that said yes, they're not as excited to be recruiting at your school if there's a lot of these dings. Remember, they like, the colleges would like to see a high percentage say yes back. So in my mind, that's the limitation. The limitation is once you're in at a superior school that you know you'd attend, don't just collect acceptances from what in your mind are inferior schools. But until that time, I believe in applying to a lot of schools. I think 13 to 15 is a good number of schools, and I break it this way. 6 core schools I mentioned. Schools where you have, you think 20% to 50% chance to get in. So they're pretty competitive, and you don't have a majority chance at any one of them. Pick 6, and I think you'll end up with 1 or maybe 2 from the core. Pick 2 backups, not 1, 2, because anything could happen. And with each of your backups, they have to feel like you could go there, okay? And maybe it's just for the money's sake that they feel like, well, they know you got a 1,400 on 2 sections of SAT, and you could potentially get into Cornell or Trinity, but you're going to apply to your not-so-great state U because you may need to stay local. or financially you may only be able to afford the local state U. All right, that's a good enough reason. But the other backup that might be a kind of remote private school, make them feel there's a reason I might want to go to St. John's. St. John's is the one in Maryland anyway, not the one in Queens. The one in Maryland is uniquely, they make kids just read great books for 2 straight years. They study very little practical, but they like imbibe liberal artsy stuff. And if that turns you on, even though most of the things you're applying for are more practical, okay, St. John's then could be an appealing backup. 2 backups, not 1, 2, unless you're prepared to take a year off, which is not a terrible thing. I actually like gap years. When you do something productive, you can be more appealing to colleges later on. You learn more, you grow more, and you might even make money if you have a work job. Instead of spending your father's $55,000, you actually bank $30,000 during that 19-year-old off year. So I don't think people should be afraid. I even have an article, it's on the ivybound.net blog, that gap year should not be considered a stigma. 20 years ago, it was. Somebody taking a gap year had something bad happen, or they did something bad themselves, or they were clearly so immature. But now 20% of people arrive on campus at age 19 instead of 18. And nobody knows how old you are anyway, so you're not at all stigmatized when you get there. And a gap year, especially for boys, I think is a very good thing to have more maturity and more focus that colleges will find appealing. So not having a backup is, in my mind, acceptable. It's what I call the 6 core, the reach, and 0. I think I call it 6-12-0, where there might be 12 reach schools. So here's the rest of the applications. As many reach schools as you sincerely would like to go to and are willing to write $75 checks and spend an extra hour on the application, because you do have to put in some extra stuff. Sometimes significantly more stuff if they ask for extra essays. You can't just whip out an essay in 12 minutes. So you can often copy-paste a good essay from another school and then embellish it in 12 minutes. But they're asking, if they're asking for a brand new topic, then you do have to take care. Yes, you have to fill out some other stuff, and you write a $75 check. But what that does for you, writing and applying to an extra 12 reach schools, so now I'm up to 18 to 20, it gives you more chances of any one of them saying yes. So if you're looking for a competitive school, since the odds are low, but when you multiply by a number, then collectively the odds of one yes go up. So I don't believe in your school putting a clamp on you. They might not want to have their recommenders all be saying the same thing over and over and over to 18 schools. Then you might have to go with a copied recommendation or get a different recommender who's like an outsider, a coach who's not in the school. Try to get your wishes adhered to, because it is your future. So here's how some people might select and get down from 150 colleges to somewhere between 12 and 20. I have 2 matrices. I have 1 matrix, sorry, but 2 axes. The across axis shows urban, suburban, rural. The down axis is large, medium, small. And I've put a bunch of schools where distance matters somewhat. I'm presuming somebody in the Northeast. So I'm not saturated with West Coast schools, but I got a few, and I note how far away they are, 6 hours away, 8 hours away from a Northeast applicant. But otherwise, this is a decent matrix of pretty competitive schools. And then here's what a kid does with it. This is really the last page. What a kid does is makes it my matrix. This is somebody who's decided, all right, I don't want rural. So look at the right-hand column, knocks out rural. Now you're between urban and suburban. Won't travel to the West Coast. Okay? That got rid of a bunch of schools that were originally on there. Okay? Adding a couple schools. Third line, I may need to save money. This girl's from New York. She's going to add SUNY, which wasn't originally on there, but I put them in the top middle. Now we've got SUNY Binghamton, SUNY Albany. They're good schools in the state of New York system. Binghamton's a very good school. What else does the kid do? Oh, she even describes, why am I knocking out Tulane? I'm not a New Orleans type of girl. Why am I knocking out U Vermont? Because I don't want to be like Ben Cohen before he founded the company. It's very druggy still. So this is, a way of looking at, a way of making or cutting down. Now look, there's still about 40 schools on this list. This is a lot. How might you cut down more? That's for my final page. Really, it's for my final line. Visits to me, they don't tell you that much. Unless you make it a real visit. That you don't go on just the tour and stay in just the place that they want and walk into the admissions building. They're all nice. You stay over with some kid. You do a Thursday into a Friday. You board on the couch or even the floor space in some upperclassman's dorm. Probably somebody from your hometown that the school can set you up with who's at the school now. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. And then you really experience what they do on Thursday afternoon. Do they party on Thursday evening or not? What's going on in the dorm? Are there classes on Friday morning? Or is that just not happening and everyone's clearing out? Or maybe they're not clearing out, but they're not doing anything productive. And they're just like preparing for a Friday night like wild party. Some people might like that. Most of your parents don't. Figure that out by really experiencing the college. And if you don't have the kind of time to do that on 4 or 5 Thursday and Fridays, that's a lot of time to take out of school. Wait until you're accepted. Okay, get 4 or 5 acceptances and then visit in the senior spring. Okay, you can't do that if you're doing early decision. But if you're doing the multiple decisions, that's the best time to visit the schools that have said yes to you. High school vacation's a good time if you want to make those decisions beforehand. And what happens, I wasn't going to go into this, but you're a good audience. What happens if you're not going to be able to visit the school? How can you show them that you know about the school well? I like interviewing recent alums or maybe upperclassmen. And here's the one big question I like to ask of a recent alum. What are you proud of about your school? And notice that might not coincide with what the school says they're proud of. And here's another one. If you have a special interest that you want to take part in for the next 4 years at your college, asking that recent alum, what might I do at this school where I'd flourish? Okay, I'm an oboist, and I contacted you because you have a music background. Can you tell me what I might end up doing to have my oboe flourish? Or is the school newspaper really... Actually, that's a bad question because it's pretty evident what a school newspaper produces, so that's not a great question. Recent alums, how do you find them? You find them through Googling. But you could also find them from your own high school who has a counselor who's been there for 6 or 7 years. She's probably got the names of the people who are now attending at University of New Hampshire, University of Vermont, Dartmouth. That is a way to get good real knowledge and good fodder. Fodder is like stuff you can use for the school's sake. That in your application you can say, This is why I think this is a good fit. 2 of your recent alums attest to this activity put on by Professor Jeffords. I hope to be able to take advantage of that, and I hope you give me a chance to. That's coming in near the bottom of an optional essay. All right, if anyone wants to stay, I'm going to open up for 5 minutes of questions, and then I will get into this inclusion and exclusion. Actually, you know what? It's on the page. I'll address it right now, and then we'll just go Q&A. The dumb stats. The stats where ranking, I think, is ridiculous. The U.S. News ranking system is, for better or worse, the Bible. And so if you're trying to play to rank, which is not a terrible thing, okay, rank of college does greatly help your employment prospects for the first year. It's only going to work the 1 year that you want to start your job, or your grad school prospects. That's where college ranking matters. After 2 years of employment, they don't care where you went to school. They care how you've served your colleagues in this endeavor. So the rankings do have weight. But if you want to look beyond the rankings, here's one thing that I think is ridiculous. The peer rating of these colleges, they're rated by people who may not have ever set foot on campus. They send these surveys out to academics to say, what do you think of these 100 other universities? And the academic has only set foot on 5 others, and maybe for only a week at a time when he was an adjunct professor. He doesn't really know the other 95 other colleges. It's kind of dumb, yet that's a big, powerful statistic in the U.S. News factor. Another I think is kind of dumb is size of class. Average class size. That's important in 2nd grade when sharing and socialization is really important. In college, class size is irrelevant. I think it's almost inverse, because if you have a very small average class size, there's a good chance that they're small because the professors are losers. The 200 student lecture is big because they have an appealing lecturer. That's why they flock to his class. Don't use that class size as a factor. I do think also professors who are full-time or professors of the highest possible degree, I don't think it matters. If you really want to learn with one of those esteemed ivory tower academics, you'll find him or her. It may take till junior year. You may be stuck with I won't say stuck with, that's the wrong word. You may be learning from an adjunct professor or a guest lecturer or even a graduate student teaching you freshman physics. That happens. They're not necessarily bad teachers. That clout rating tends to only help when you're applying to elite graduate school programs and you need some marquee professor name to help you in that graduate application. But here's where it actually hurts. If you want to go into some practical endeavor, I think you're better off with the adjunct, the guy who's a banker 40 hours a week and wants to lecture 3 hours a week to the school students. He's probably more passionate. He's certainly more practical than the ivory tower teacher. You want to do phys ed, and you could actually have a guest lecturer, or maybe it's a whole semester with, you know, the nutritionist for the San Francisco 49ers. It's off season, so they do the spring instead of the fall. That's cool. You'll learn more. You'll get an opportunity to hang with Joe Montana. That's probably more career-oriented than the 30 years in lecturer who has high PhD ranking in sports science. All right, let me open up to questions, and let me make it a full 1 minute break, though. Some people want to leave. They have no questions. We'll let you go and wish you a good start to fall. The rest of you I'll catch up with in 60 seconds. Good night to the rest of you. All right, those who are still on, let me ask of you. I'll start in the Northeast this time. Any questions you'd like answered? I'll move outside of the Northeast. Anyone from other parts of the country with questions you'd like answered? All right, well, here's how, if I did have a question from before this even started. Hey, does Ivy Bound do individualized help for my kid's application? We have adjuncts that do. So Ivy Bound technically does not, but I have a few good, trusted people who are willing to be billed through Ivy Bound, so it's easy if you're already a client. Rate's the same if you use them versus us, it doesn't matter. But we could get you set up that way with one of now 4 that I think would do a good job at either the brainstorming stage. Now, your attendance here might have given you good brainstorming anyway, and then all you'd need them for is the other one, which is the editing. And the process of working with one of these people is a slow crafting. Where you're going to have only one face-to-face, or it might even be Skype session, half hour. Maybe 2 hours if you got to do the brainstorming part. But after those 2 hours, you're doing a back and forth by submitting via email, letting the guide edit, give you suggestions. They're not going to write whole paragraphs for you, but they might write a sentence that you could use. They might give you ideas for making it better. They can certainly edit for better grammar and making it more concise. If you don't use one of these professional people, at least use somebody, okay? And that could be mom plus dad. And I think there should be 2 because mom alone might not catch something or might not want to say, this isn't so good. So 2 outsiders makes sense, or 1 professional outsider. I think that's good enough. When you use Ivy Bound, though, you do have, in a way, 2 outsiders because these 4 people that we're aligned with, they're still going to have a second set of eyes. Sometimes it's mine on the essay at some point in the development. And if you have a resume as well, they might send the resume at the same time. So Ivy Bound sort of gets you that extra set of eyes so that you don't have to use your parents for the last thing. If you do use an evaluator who's not one of ours, I have 4 questions that evaluator should be asking. 1, am I clear? 2, am I redundant? 3, am I interesting? 4, can I change order for better effect? Again, clear, avoiding redundancy, interesting, and a change order for better effect. You can ask those questions of yourself. But when you're asking somebody else, see if they can have those 4 questions in mind at least when they're doing the evaluation. All right, I'm going to call it a night. If there is any other questions, I'm open for email later in the week. Otherwise, I'll wish you a great start to your fall. And what's the secret word? Trenchant. Okay, good night.